I think we're ready now. Yep. Well done, Sam. Okay. Welcome to Monday the 3rd of March, Cabinet meeting at Town Hall. May I have authority to authorise to sign the minutes of our last meeting, please? Very good. Oops. Apologies for absence, Julie?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Tempe.
Thank you. Are there any additional agenda items?
No, there's none, Chair.
Thank you. And urgent decisions at all?
No, there's none of those as well.
Okay, thank you. Disclosures of interest and dispensations to receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable interests, non-registrable interests in matters on the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question.
I understand today we've received a group dispensation to discuss matters concerning local government reorganisation as councillors. So I just wanted to put that on the record that we've received a dispensation to that effect. I don't know if the Chief Executive wants to say any more.
I don't think it was related to this meeting, but I think it was coming up at our next cabinet, perhaps.
I think, Councillor Bayliss, that's for the discussion at full council and cabinet on the 19th of March. And I think it will be one, you then have that dispensation to talk about those issues, because obviously all members are actually impacted, but we're going to have to discuss it. But I think it was for that meeting. I haven't seen the email, but yeah.
Thanks for clarity of that, Lorna. Okay, so the first, Councillor Thomas.
Chair, as chair of the Rother District Housing Company, I think it's another, another notifiable interest.
Jolly good, that's noted. Ash, sorry, I didn't see your hand go up.
That's okay, no problem. Thank you, Chair. Just to register a personal interest in agenda item 6, the draft homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, by way of warming up the homeless, being a voluntary consultee in the strategy, and I'm a trustee for them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. No other disclosures?
Can Councillor Thomas just clarify which item?
Yes, sorry, which item was asked to clarify which item, Richard, you were?
It's relevant.
Items, agenda 6.
Item 6, yeah, and the same for you, Richard.
And in my case, it's relevant to the item 7 and also relevant to the devolution item 8.
Let's move forward. So the draft homelessness and rough sleeping strategy report of Acting Director of Community Joe Powell, Cabinet Member Councillor Rory McCourt. Who's going to introduce this report?
Chair, I'll just say a few words if it's okay. I'll be very brief, and then perhaps the officers can come in. Obviously, I spoke to this on the 6th of January when it came to Cabinet then, and it's in the interim period it has gone to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and it's now obviously out for consultation as a result of coming through here. I think it's a good report, and I think the broad themes of early intervention to prevent homelessness, increase the supply of high quality housing, the access to temporary accommodation, and noting that hopefully we'll have 73 units of temporary accommodation pretty soon, 12 of those being housing first units. So the broad sweep of this strategy is very good and is to be commended. And just a few things that perhaps after consultation we need to consider. The issue of social value, sustainable development, carbon neutral developments. Maybe that's probably better sitting with the other development strategy though, but it's a consideration that I looked at. And of course, everything is somewhat up in the air with the proposals for devolution and the new unitary arrangements. So I think being further down the line, we hopefully will have a clearer picture of what will emerge across Sussex and there may be a need to revisit this. That's all I would say, like with a lot of things, really. But the broad scope and the broad outlines of this are sound, and I think they will stay as they are, whatever unitary arrangements happen. In Appendix D, can I ask that Bexhill Community Land Trust be consulted as one of the voluntary organisations as well? And lastly, I'd like to thank the officers, Catherine and Caroline, doing such a great job, and Joe as well, and also the Overview and Scrutiny Committee under Councillor Osborne, who've also done a really, as usual, a good job in looking at this. So yeah, I commend it, and I formally move the report.
Okay, Rory, thank you. Joe?
It's just a couple of things, I suppose. The first one being that obviously it's been developed in conjunction with one that's been developed across East Sussex, so hopefully we'll be in a good place in terms of dilution. And also that at the moment we're required to carry on just because statutorily we have to have one that is, we've extended the old one, but that's it really.
Any further comments, Joe?
No, just to thank Caroline and the team for putting this together over some months. Just, I mean, it's in the report what the key features of the strategy are. Yes, devolution is going to be, and local government reorganisation is going to be a key theme, but I want to reassure you that we're working right in the centre of the development of the East Sussex strategy on this, and it's becoming reframed into a local government reorganisation context. We will, obviously, in the delivery and the action plan of this document, that will become more of a feature to reassure members. But in summary, the executive summary of the strategy itself, which is appended to the report, I think gives a really good overview of what the key features of this strategy are and how we will seek to minimise the impact of homelessness on our community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Joe, and thank you, Caroline, for the work that you have put into this with others. I think it's important that we have this documentation here, and also Paul for scrutiny's involvement, which I think is valued. We need to move this report. Yeah. And second?
Yeah, second.
Thank you. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We just move forward to the next item, which is page 653. Okay, agenda item 7. This is the Community Grant Scheme, round 2. Report of the Head of Corporate and Strategic Services, Anna Evid, but I believe that, I'm not quite sure, I think Nicola is online. And so do you want to present this report, Nicola, or are you going to Teresa? Right, start it off. Well done.
Sorry, thank you very much. This is, as you said, Community Grants Scheme Round 2. The community grants were detailed in Appendix A, which everybody will have seen. We had 8 applications, 4 are in this paper and were agreed. So what we would ask is that they are approved today. And the second part is that members are asked to promote Community Grants Scheme and the Rother Community Lottery within their wards. Interestingly, I think they need to be supported because of the amount of good work we know that they do and how necessary they are. But hopefully by next month, we will have a cabinet paper looking at a different approach to community grants. Mentioned it a few months ago, which is about the Sussex Partnership Group, and we hopefully will be able to bring a paper to next month which actually explains Sussex Partnership Group's role. But for this month, it is just to actually approve the 4 proposals that we have here tonight.
That's it. Thank you. Councillor Bayliss, Christine.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'd echo all the comments from Councillor Clean about the work that the officers put in. Just one point really for me is it's very disappointing that there aren't any Bexhill organisations that are in receipt of a grant. And I just wondered if officers had got any feedback on why we are why we haven't got any Bexhill organisations, and is there more that we can do to promote it to people in Bexhill? I'm sure there are some really good causes that could certainly qualify for a grant.
Thank you, Christine. Teresa, have you got...
Yeah, well, my response to that would be that actually we find it quite hard to get the right applications in with the right requirements within them, and that will be a very good reason for having Sussex Partnership Group, because they know where all of the small community groups are that actually would be able to put an application in and would be helped to put an application in, because I think a lot of people don't because they think it's too hard. So actually it tends to be parish councils that put it in because they've got a clerk who is prepared to do it and put the work in. But I don't know if you've got anything else to say, Anna.
No, I think you've covered everything. The Sussex Community Foundation that we're looking to partner with, subject to approval, they have quite a good reach and the system is quite streamlined. So I think Councillor Colleen is right. I think the process possibly puts people off. It is quite unwieldy. It takes quite a lot of effort. But I do take your point about advertising and making sure it's publicised more widely.
Christine?
Yeah, so I just wonder, do we, or we did at one stage when I was on the community grants panel, have RVA actually as a member of the panel, and they are they contracted to support community organisations with grant applications? I thought they were.
Yeah, yes, they are. In fact, Nicola has got her hand up, so I think she's desperate to actually... yes, I think she's desperate.
I was looking at the screen with
right.
Nicola, so I think that perhaps we could invite Nicola to cover off any of those points that have been raised, Nicola, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Yes, we did actually have 2 applications from Bexhill groups. However, they were ineligible. One because the match funding wasn't in place, and the other because the necessary permissions were not in place, which we've invited them to come back at a future round, or depending on what the future grant scheme looks like, apply at a future date. Yes, RVA do support applications and we do defer. Within the applications we've got here today, 2 of the applications were supported by RVA.
Jolly good, thanks for that clarity. No other points, no other hands up, nobody else wants to say anything? Okay, so if we can move this report, Teresa, thank you, and Rory will second that report, and those in favour. That's unanimous. I think that there is a mention here on item 5 about the community lottery, the Rother Lottery, and the big winner, which was a lovely event for someone to go away with a £25,000 first draw, and that's part of the mechanics of the funding of all of this, and I think it's a really good boost for us all. So thank you for all those that are involved in that particular event. Right, bear with me. Can you just remind me what page I need to turn over to? Thank you. Oh, I've got it actually. Okay, agenda item 8. They're protecting local services, the draft service asset devolution framework. This is the report of Lorna, Chief Executive, but I know that Duncan Ellis has put quite a bit of background work into this. Are you with us, Duncan? Okay. We don't worry that we've lost him, but perhaps he'll come back. No? Okay, perhaps not. It's pretty straightforward, this report. It's to create a framework of how we move along to protect and sustain assets and services for the local communities, reducing subsidies and potentially minimising any future liabilities being passed on to any new authority. So it is an important piece of work, and we do need to have a framework. And Lorna has been involved with Duncan in bringing this report this evening, and I'm sure she would like to make 1 or 2 comments.
Thank you, Chair. I will go through it because it is quite a thorough report and it is a new process. So I think it's important that we kind of understand how this fits in with our existing policy framework. And it is a process, and rather than a policy itself. But this, so the purpose of the report is, as Doug says, to create a framework within which to protect and sustain assets and services for local communities. And this is in the context of the government's wider devolution agenda and local government reorganisation. So we now know that Sussex is included in the government's devolution priority programme, and we need to prepare initial plans for LGR, Local Government Reorganisation, by the 21st of March, and the final proposals coming forward by the 26th of September. So that's the context to which this framework has been put together, and it does very much build on the previous devolution work that we've been undertaking for some time now, but I think very much represents a different context in which we're having these conversations with particularly town and parish councils. As the leader said, it also is set out in the context of reducing costs, which will be important to protect the council's medium-term financial position and minimise any future liabilities which are passed to a future unitary authority. So in terms of the decisions, we need to provide some clarity around the process. I think that's a bit of learning from the last stage of devolution, that actually the process perhaps wasn't as clear as it could have been. So in this paper, we're very much trying to be as explicit as possible on what the expectations of those that might want to put in an expression of interest, what the process is. And some of those key considerations from our point of view are understanding what the community wants and needs through engagement, protecting key services and assets that the communities value, keeping decision-making and operations as local as possible, and that's particularly important, I think, in the context of a new authority, minimising our carbon footprint by ensuring supply chains are kept local, reducing the council's cost base for discretionary spend and asset base, minimising liabilities transferred to the new authority, assessing the ability of partners to take on the assets and services they're interested in, and seeking best value and value for money for council taxpayers. And of course, it needs to be legally compliant and alignment with the council's own aspirations and vision for the district. So the draft framework itself is set out at Appendix 2, which you can see on pages 86 to 108. And this sets out the overarching framework and a number of supporting documents, which include a process flowchart, the draft expressions of interest form, a draft business case template, and a document covering the legal framework, which we need to take into consideration, and how the assessments will actually be carried out. And it also provides an outline scope of what is might be considered out of scope or outside the scope of consideration of this process. And this includes those assets that generate significant income, such as chargeable car parks, or if they're held to fulfil strategic priorities, assets held for future capital realisation, assets held or land held for future development of a council or partner scheme, and vacant land or buildings that can generate a significant capital receipt. So not everything in here, not everything the council does will be part of this process, and some assets it won't be appropriate to put through this process. There is a caveat to that, though, and although those are exclusions, there may be instances, depending on the expressions of interest we get forward, where it does make sense, for example, to put a chargeable car park with another asset if overall that makes a net saving to the council. So there may be exceptions, and we will have to consider some of these expressions of interest. It will be on a case-by-case basis. So the initial expressions of interest process is focused on negotiations with parish and town councils. However, it doesn't mean that others won't come forward to put expressions of interest in. We'll have to see what comes forward. So we are setting a time period on this, and basically we're seeing this process running for a 6-month period. But we will also have to put an end point, I think, on this process when no further submissions can be accepted. And this is largely due to our own capacity to actually deal with this. And, you know, as time goes on, we will increasingly get involved in discussions about the setup of the new council and the setup of the mayoral combined authority too. So this is something that we do recognise we need to put resource into, and we will make sure that we have the officer there to support this process. And we're proposing to use the Investor Save Reserve to make sure that we're resourcing this process properly. There has been some early engagement, so we have spoken, for example, to RALC, which was about a month ago now. We did sort of say that this process was coming, and we've had a few conversations. We've spoken to the town councils at Rye and Battle and Bexhill to make them aware that this process is coming, and we'll also be engaging through the Clerks Forum as well. So engagement, I think, is going to be key to this process, and making sure that particularly parish and town councils understand what's required of them going forward. So, yeah, I'm happy to take any questions, but a number of people have a hand in designing this, including Joe and Duncan online and Anna around the room. So I'm sure we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lorna. Just a query. When this was announced at Parliament with the Secretary of State for Housing, there was a question asked in Parliament about where councils have specific cultural buildings and what may happen to those. And there's one question in particular, I think, which mentioned a civic theatre, for example. Obviously, without going into detail, do you know anything more about that? I think there was a supplementary paper perhaps coming on specific cultural building assets. Yeah, any awareness on that? Thank you.
Not on that, but that sounds incredibly helpful. And I think the other expressions of interest from, particular trusts that may come forward, it would be very helpful to have further guidance on that. So we'll certainly keep an eye out for that. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sam?
Yeah, I think it sort of makes me quite glad that we had the foresight to sort of see this potential process coming a number of years back, from community governance review, and actually making sure that all of our areas had parish town council representation, and actually starting that devolution process quite early on, because that allowed us to find the sort of the flaws in our process and get to this point now. Because I think if we'd just started talking about devolution, we would have then discovered the issues we'd discovered a while back, and it would have been a big risk of, sort of the loss of services. But I think the engagement is going to be really important, because previously I think town and parish councils haven't quite got to grips with the sort of with everything, and there's been a bit of miscommunication. So I think that's really key here.
It's almost as if they thought it wasn't going to happen, but I think it's here for real now. Christine.
Yes, thank you. And I think this is a really useful piece of work. I think it's really clearly written and set out. I know it's a long paper, but it is an excellent piece of work. I would sort of say in November 24 at Cabinet, and I think it went on to full council, we did agree the asset disposal policy, of which we're currently under that policy devolving the public toilets, or we've got a scheme out at the moment where we've got bids coming in from businesses to run various different public conveniences as businesses with public convenience facilities. I just wonder if you can reassure us that that policy will continue. This will not sort of, they will not have to sort of divert back and go around the block again. And I think it's really important to make a clear statement that process is progressing, and that we hope to have some of our public conveniences open at least, well, I'm hoping for Easter, but hopefully we will certainly have them by the summer.
Lorna, do you want to respond, please?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Bayliss. And actually, I should have mentioned that the property and service investment disposal panel that's getting longer, isn't it? It was originally about acquisitions, then disposals, and that was also looking at services. That it is proposed that the terms of reference of that group are updated so that this process can be part of their considerations going forward. But in terms of the processes that we've started, those processes must complete. And we're about to set up a panel to go through the expressions of interest we've had on the toilets and take that forward. So absolutely, that process needs to complete.
Thank you. Councillor Catherine Field.
Thank you. Yes, I thought this was a very interesting paper, and I think the council has assets which should have been devolved a very long time ago in a very much less complicated arrangement than we have in place now. Having said that, we are where we are, as they say. I think there are tensions in this paper, though. Framework objectives to protect and sustain assets and services for local communities. and understanding what communities want and need. What they want and need might well not be what we think we have to do with those assets. A community with a car park, for example, which generates an awful lot of income, may well feel that they'd like that. But I understand that there's an informal protocol between the districts and boroughs and the county council that nothing will be devolved, which would be detrimental to the unitary authority in the end. So are we considering giving away or devolving, or whatever we call it, assets which are generating large amounts of income? I hope, because I think it's not spelt out here, and there are those tensions, and it would certainly concern me.
I'll let Lorna come back on that.
Yeah. That is a really, really good point, and those tensions, I'm sure, will come out as we go through this process. But I think what the paper does do is it does explain there are certain assets, if they're income generating, we can't be doing things that are detrimental to the new authority. And there will come a point when actually the new authority will be able to veto a decision of a district council that might be seen as being a detrimental step for their future financial position. So those tensions are going to arise, and I think that's why we need the panel, to balance all those different competing priorities and to give, you know, a considered view to each expression of interest that comes in, but using this policy to give a bit of a guide to where those decisions are taken. But inevitably there'll be things that, you know, come along which kind of actually it does make sense on this occasion, and this is why, and there's going to be need to be able to capture those discussions and bring them back to Cabinet for decision.
So there's not really one size that fits all on this. We have the discretion, and that's the whole purpose of the panel that's coming forward. Councillor Richard Thomas. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think one of the advantages of this process is that it does concentrate minds, doesn't it? So that people are aware that it's not just enough to sort of make political speeches and to take up grandiose positions. It's a question of actually getting down and seeing what can really be done. And in my discussions with members of the Town Council, I've been very pleased to notice a change of attitude, that there's a much greater willingness for people on the Town Council side to look upon rather as a beneficent authority trying to do its best in a difficult situation, rather than make political speeches simply attacking us. And so far as I can tell, there is a willingness on behalf of the Town Council now to consider taking over assets such as the toilets and such as parks and gardens, beyond the extent to which that was in the past. And I think that's something we should welcome warmly. I'm not expecting any further details of what discussions there have been, but can you confirm there are discussions going on with the Town Council about taking over those particular services I've mentioned, please?
Yes, we have had, I think I mentioned in my introduction, we have had discussions with the 3 town councils, and we're continuing to engage with them on a regular basis, and I think that's really important. It was certainly important to the leader that those meetings, so we can increase understanding really of what we're trying to achieve here. But I think you're right about focusing the mind. We have a window to do this in, and that's a serious deadline, isn't it? You know, so I think that will help this process, and the kind of negotiate. What we can't have is the years and years of discussion about this sort of transfer and not necessarily have an outcome. We have got a window, and we will consider what comes in that window, and then we will have to move on because our time will be taken up with other aspects of devolution and LGR.
A significant amount of work is going to be involved in this, you know, and it's the capacity of making sure that it's business as usual and also dealing with additional demands. But I'm sure we will get there. Councillor Paul Osborne. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A lot of what I was thinking has basically been said. I've got the paper in front of me. 30th of September, you know, is the other end of summer, but as time flies quicker when you seem to get older, that is not long at all. And I think that sort of, you know, over the years, we've tried to devolution with parishes and everybody else, and it's been a slow process. And I think now is the chance they've got. If a parish in my patch wants a bit of allotment or a playing field or a bit of a field or something, or an old toilet or something, now is the time for them to actually get on with it, because the clock is ticking. Time for time for nattering and thinking about it is gone. The chance is now, and that will be gone by the end of September. So, so there's going to be a lot of work and a lot of panic stations from a lot of people who have sort of thought about things for a few years, and now, you know, there's a finite amount of time. So I think it's sort of incumbent upon us sort of country members to narrow that down in the next couple of weeks or this month, specifically to parish councils, to say, yeah, if you've been thinking about something, get on with it now. So, thanks, Chairman.
Without a doubt. And it's not only the involvement of our parishes, it's also community groups who may feel they're well placed in order to put forward an expression of interest, because so often whatever assets or whatever is going on should be in the hand of the local community, and some of them are very, very well positioned and well organised to deal with that. So I think we would encourage all of that. Duncan, I see you're online and Joe's here. I know you both had an involvement in this paper that's come tonight. Did you want to make any observations?
Not from me, Chair. I think it's been covered. Thank you.
Joe, did you want to make any comment other than...
Only to reiterate the point which was made, but just to remake it really, in the fact that we see this very much as a dialogue with parish and town partners, and I hope this framework will provide that context for us, which perhaps was absent in previous conversations, and this will improve the quality of those conversations.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that the clock started. You know, there is a time limit on all of this. It is for real, so I'm sure everyone will respond accordingly. I would like to move this report, if I may, and if I can have someone that might want to second this for me. Teresa, thank you very much indeed. And if we can vote, and those in favour, jolly good, thank you. And thank you for all those involved in putting this very comprehensive framework together. So we will move on to agenda item 9, which is all part of the Councillor Killeen's roadshow this evening. Your second report, Teresa, Rother Local Development Scheme. And welcome, Mike, to Cabinet this evening. I think it's your first Cabinet, I think. Yep. So welcome to Cabinet this evening and welcome to Rother. I think we've had that conversation, but it's nice to see you here. So I'll hand over to you, Teresa.
Thank you. Yes, this is just to share with Cabinet the updated Rother Local Development Scheme document, which you will have seen at Appendix A. We want to ask you to accept this document, approve it, so that the Chief Exec can be authorised to send a copy of the local development scheme to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government very quickly, by the 6th of March. As we know, the local plan is very important for each council to produce, and the local development scheme simply sets out the programme and the timescale for the production of the local plan, which has to be done by the end of 2026. So I recommend that the local development scheme is approved and sent to MHCLG by the 6th of March. I think also I'd like to thank Holly and the team for all the work on this, because it's a good, clear document to read.
Thank you very much. Holly, did you want to make any comments, please?
Thank you. So as Councillor Killeen has said, there's a government requirement for all local planning authorities to publish a new local development scheme by the 6th of March. The local development scheme, the LDS, has to include clear, realistic and specific dates for consultation and submission of the local plan. So you may recall Rother most recently published its LDS last spring. That was when we launched the public consultation on the draft local plan. It's a factual document, so it contains information about the development plan for Rother, progress with neighbourhood plans, for example, and the publication of planning policy documents. The bulk of the scheme is unchanged from the version that we published last spring. However, what has changed is the timetable for the new local plan. The changes to the timetable are shown in detail in the table on the second page of the Cabinet report. That's below paragraph 4. Overall, the changes mean that a delay in the adoption of the new local plan of about 1 year is expected. That's compared to what we thought last spring. Meaning that means the new local plan should be adopted in sort of late 2027 after examination by the Planning Inspectorate. While any delay to the adoption of the local plan isn't ideal, it's unfortunately inevitable given the changes to the wider planning landscape resulting from the election of the new government last year and the publication of the new National Planning Policy Framework. The government recognises that all local planning authorities will need more time to reflect on the revised NPPF and progress positive local plans that will stand up to scrutiny at examination. The government's made it clear that local plans must not be submitted until they're ready and are capable of being found sound at examination. And Rother's revised timetable set out in the LDS allows that extra time for the extra work that will be needed. I just wanted to point out, I spotted it today, there's a small error at paragraph 10, which states that our statement of community involvement has to be reviewed every 3 years, which would mean it would be out of date. The correct review period is actually every 5 years.
Thank you, Holly. Are there any questions from anywhere or any points that you want to add to this? I think we are where we needed to be on this, so that's always reassuring that we're not. And thank you very much for your. I think you picked this up halfway through, did you, Holly? If I can remember, it was sort of landed on your desk one morning. Yes, and but yeah, you've obviously taken this under your wing and produced the report that we have here today. Mike, did you want to make any observations at all? Please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the warm welcome to Rother as well. No, all I would just sort of add to what Holly has said is that the government have provided this deadline for a reason, which is they recognise that most local planning authorities are going to need this time, and we're going to run as hard as we can to make the deadline. Thank you, Chair.
Jolly good, thank you for that reassurance. Councillor Thomas. Jolly good. I think that's been noted. Can't hear you, Richard.
So, my apologies. The problem is, however, that it will come into operation in late 2027. I'm afraid not very long before this council ceases to operate. But nevertheless, there are some very important issues, I think, raised by the government papers on this. And so I've just got some questions about it. The first question is, to what extent have we been able to take account of the implications for the local plan of the incredible increase in the number of housing units demanded of Rother under the government's plan to build 1.5 million houses. So the first question is, does the plan take account of this incredible increase in the demands upon the council? The second question is, does it take into account the government's priorities in terms of building first of all in brownfield sites, then in grey areas, and then obviously in other areas? Thirdly, does it take account of a particularly interesting part, I think, of the government's plans, which is it's trying to encourage developments around stations. Now, there are opportunities within this particular district, I think, for looking at the different stations and wondering what opportunities there are to actually build around them. And I wonder whether this has been taken into account. It's a very, very interesting idea because if you build around stations, it means people in those houses will have more access to employment over a wider area. And so that would be advantageous to the people in those particular areas. And so I'm just wondering to what extent have we taken that into account? And just to let councillors know that the housing company has taken an interest in this and we're exploring those opportunities ourselves. I'm not saying anything will come of that, but I think we're in a situation now where all of us need to get as much information as we can about what are the possibilities and what are the opportunities. And the housing company wants to be part of that. So just some questions.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Yeah. Holly, did you get those questions all right?
I did. I was writing them down.
Well done. I'll let you answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So some questions about whether the local plan has taken these things into account. I mean, the answer is it hasn't yet, but it will do. So we've set out in the detailed timetable in the LDS the sort of what we'll be doing in quarters over the next couple of years until we get to that December 2026 deadline of submitting. And that gives us, I think, for the next year, we will be refining the evidence base, doing more evidence-based work, in particular looking at lots of sites. We were working, you talked, so the first question was about housing numbers. When we started this local plan process, our sort of housing target, as it were, was about 727. Our adopted target, which was adopted in 2011, was 335. So we were way off that number anyway. Then the number went up, as you know, and the latest NPPF gives the number at something like 932. The government's made it very clear that local planning authorities are expected to meet those numbers, or at least demonstrate why they can't meet those numbers very, very strongly. So that is a significant bit of work that we will need to be doing. When we had the local plan consultation in last spring, we did publish our draft housing and economic land availability assessment at the time. We will be further refining that, looking at more sites, looking to up densities on appropriate sites. And I think this probably goes, hopefully answers your second and third questions as well, which were about priority building on brownfield sites. We'll certainly be looking at brownfield sites as part of that. And also, the priority for building around stations. And, we've always had a sort of a sustainable development angle to the local plan, looking to focus development in those more sustainable locations. So, they're all excellent points that we will certainly be taking into account as we progress with the local plan.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Yeah, thank you very much, Holly. Catherine, it did go up, didn't it? Yes.
Well, I did want to comment. I wasn't going to, but as Councillor Thomas has raised the issue of railway stations, I'm delighted to hear that the housing company is very enthusiastic about building around railway stations, because Blackfriars is quite close to Battle Station. You might remember that former Councillor Dixon from this council and myself, and now Councillor Cook, are adamant that the Blackfriars development must contain downside access to Battle Station. So I do hope that Councillor Thomas's pronouncement now means that that is still in his plan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure that will be attended to in some way, shape or form, but here comes the answer.
That's just very quickly. It is an issue which I raise within the company on every possible occasion. So yes, I'm very aware and I'm entirely behind you in relation to that. Yes.
Very good. Are there any other questions here? I've got online Councillor John Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, the Housing Task Force did, in its deliberations, recommend that we did a new doomsday book for Rother by consulting with the parish councils on the basis of what sites were absolutely impossible, but what really should be analysed. I think it's absolutely vital we get fairly soon to realistic for our villages, so that they know the scale of the development that they're looking for sites for. It doesn't mean that they will be able to deliver everything, but unless you have that allocation, the consultation with parishes tends to not throw up all the sites that might be possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think there's a response there. Holly, at all, perhaps?
Just to reassure Councillor Barnes and everybody that we will certainly be consulting with the parishes as we have done throughout the process.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just an observation, really. I actually think, considering the scale of the changes that have come about, I actually think just a 1 year delay is quite an impressive sort of timescale for that, and to sort of reframe it. Although I do think the broad thrust of our local plans is very much in line with, I think, what the government's trying to do. It's just we need to move faster, move quicker, build more homes, essentially, I think, isn't it? So.
Jolly good. Are there any other comments to be made or questions? Oh, sorry, yes.
So it emphasises the importance of working closely, as Holly has said, with the parishes and the town councils, so that the kind of ideas we've got here in the local plan are compatible with neighbourhood plans, and particularly neighbourhood plans that haven't yet been developed, like the one for Bexhill. So the particular ideas we've got here can survive the end of this council if the successor councils don't want to kind of continue with these local plans, but want to create new ones of their own. The principles are such good ones, it's better that they be enshrined in the neighbourhood plans of the individual parishes and towns. So just, I think it's important to say, we really need to liaise closely with parishes and town councils.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Thomas. And any other comments? No, I don't think so. This report, Teresa, you're going to move this report. Thank you.
Yes, please, we can move the report.
Yes, thank you. And Rory, going to second the report. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. And thank you for all the work that's gone in on this report. I think it's all very reassuring that we're up to speed where we need to be, and the document is where we are. So we can move on now to the agenda item 10. That's a Rye Neighbourhood Plan Review. So this is the report from Mike Hughes, Head of Planning, I presume, and are you presenting this report, Teresa, or is Mike? Have you made up your minds? I think Mike's itching to, I think, yes? Yeah, or is Holly going to do it?
Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to Holly if that's okay. Thank you.
I thought you were going to make your debut then.
Not yet.
And you brought on a sub straight away, but that's fine.
Thank you. So the Rye Neighbourhood Plan was made in 2019. It forms part of the development plan for Rye, and it contains policies and site allocations which help to direct and shape development in the parish. The Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group is now seeking to update or review the Neighbourhood Plan. The Neighbourhood Plan review follows a similar process to the original Neighbourhood Plan, in that there has been an initial public consultation which took place in autumn last year, followed by a formal submission consultation, which is the stage we are at now. Following completion of the consultation, the Neighbourhood Plan review will be considered by an independent examiner. Rother District Council is able to make comments or representations as part of this current consultation, and the purpose of the Cabinet report is to enable Cabinet to make such representations on behalf of Rother. The Neighbourhood Plan review has been light touch with relatively few changes to policies. It still relates to the period of our adopted local plan, our adopted core strategy, i.e. it doesn't propose to plan beyond this date at this stage, beyond 2028. In terms of planning for housing, the original Neighbourhood Plan allocated a number of sites to accommodate more housing than the residual requirement of the core strategy at that time. Since then, some additional dwellings have been constructed in the parish, although to date, development hasn't commenced on any of the allocated sites, despite some having planning permissions or applications. The Neighbourhood Plan review proposes to carry forward those original allocations, while also increasing the number of dwellings proposed on 2 of the sites. The resultant allocations will provide for at least 190 houses in Rye Parish, which again exceeds the residual adopted local plan target. Appendix 1 of the Cabinet report details Rother's comments on the plan. These are relatively minor, which reflect the fact that the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group has taken on board comments that officers made at the previous consultation stage. Matters that we propose to comment on include the need for clarity around references to our emerging local plan, the need to consider flooding, the strengthening of the design policy in terms of its wording, and the need for clarity around some wording and calculation. So relatively minor comments. Thank you.
Really good. Thank you, Holly. Are there any comments or observations? Christine, Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, I understand that since the original local plan has been published, there haven't been any properties built in Rye during that time, or none of the land allocations have come to fruition. And are we confident that this new version will mean that some of the land will be developed? I mean, I understand perhaps Councillor McCall might put me straight if I've got this wrong, that there's over 200 homeless or people on the housing waiting list in Rye. And it is a, you know, when you say that the amount of properties this will build, I mean, it doesn't equal what we have in terms of people waiting for homes.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I mean, Rye is not an easy parish at all for development, as you can appreciate. It has many environmental constraints, particularly flood risk, and also significant heritage constraints. There was actually quite good housing delivery in Rye at the start of the core strategy period, so we're looking sort of 2011 to 2017. There were quite a number of houses built predominantly at Valley Park on the edge of the town, but since then housing delivery has been low. The neighbourhood plan allocates those six separate sites for housing or housing and other uses. And there have been planning permissions or planning applications on some of them, and there are current applications on some as well. So although delivery has been low, because there is kind of interest in sites currently, we do anticipate that delivery will pick up over the coming years.
Does that cover off your inquiry? Thank you. Are there any other questions from here? No, I've got... Oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas.
There's one thing in it I just would like to draw everyone's attention to, and I think it's very good that you comment on it, and that's under 11, where you put, consider establishing a connection to the delivery of the proposed network of walking and cycling routes in Rye, as outlined in the East Sussex Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. I'd like to draw attention to that, because I think it's a very important comment you've made, because I think that we as Rother councillors would like to see as much emphasis as possible upon sustainable travel. And as we've got an area there with considerable potential, the cycling tourism, you would think that would be one reason to really emphasising it. But also in terms of, you know, the ecological advantages of cycling. And so I'm very glad you've drawn attention to that, and I hope that the right people will take that on board and do more to promote cycling in that region. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for making that point, and I'm sure it's been noted. Councillor Barnes. John, are you still there?
Yes, I am indeed. I just wanted to make the point, Rye being a railway town, the importance really of now that devolution is on the cards and economic development will be central to the job of the new mayor and his council. But of course, getting a high-speed rail route through to Ashford becomes a very high priority. And I hope we're going to lobby for that. I also hope that through the LGA, we may ask the government to look again at the build-out problem, because what really does worry me is the number of allocated sites. Effectively, they're bound to get outline planning permission because they're in the local plan under the new planning framework. But the builder still has neither disincentives nor incentives to build out as rapidly as the government wish, or indeed we would wish. And we've really got a huge gap between planning permissions given and houses built. And that does no good to anybody.
Right, thank you for those comments. I'm not sure there's a response to that, Holly. No. But thank you for taking those, making those points. No other questions. So this report, just remind me, is good. Teresa, are you? Yes. You're going to move this report, and I think.
Yes, I move the report.
And Sam was going to second that report.
Yep.
We got there. Any other comments at all? No, there isn't. So I think we're actually at the end of our meeting this evening. Oh, sorry, we're going to agree. Oh, right, okay. All right, we'll agree. Make sure. Yeah, should we do it twice just to make sure we got the... so we're at the end of tonight's Cabinet meeting, and thank you those who attended online and those up in the gallery this evening. It's nice to see people attending Cabinet meetings. 1924. 1924.